Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to If Deku Was the Avatar Part 5. Last time on the What If, the finals for Class 1A happened, and with the combined efforts of Izuku and Bakugo, they were able to pass. And after that, Class 1A and 1B went to the training camp. But after a couple of days, the camp gets attacked by villains, and on the night of the attack, Bakugo and Izuku got captured. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's jump into the video in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we begin this What If a couple of days after the attack, and Izuku and Bakugo were currently in anti-quirk cuffs, and since Izuku doesn't technically have a quirk, they don't actually affect him. But since it was only him against a group of people, he knew he had a low chance of winning without Bakugo getting caught in the crossfire. And when the League noticed that they were both awake, they took off Bakugo's cuffs and chains, and they asked if he would be willing to come with them and become a villain. And after they told Bakugo this, they told Izuku that he doesn't have a choice in the matter, since they will find a way to make him work for them. Then they asked Bakugo again, and in response, Bakugo fired an explosion at the group of villains. And seeing that Bakugo was free, Izuku was ready to fight, so he began to do air swipes with his fingers on the cuff, and no one noticed this since they were too busy fighting Bakugo. And after a minute, Izuku was able to cut it in half, giving both of his arms back, and with both of his arms, he was able to get out of the chains. And once he was completely free from the cuffs, he got noticed by Mr. Compress, so he joined the fight as well. But before either of the sides could win, someone knocks on the door, which makes both of the groups stop. But after a couple of seconds, the wall next to the door got completely destroyed, and there was now a giant hole, and standing in the hole was a group of heroes, with some being Kamui Woods, All Might, Edgeshot, and a small old man Izuku didn't know. And seeing all this, Kurogiri tried to make a portal out of the hideout, but in response, Edgeshot knocked him out. Then Kamui Woods wrapped up all the villains with his arms, and in response, Dabi tried to burn the wood, but the old man quickly kicked Dabi in the head, knocking him out as well. And after that, All Might asked the two if they were okay, and they were just about to leave, but before anyone could react, weird portals opened up that weren't Kurogiri's, and it summoned different Nomus to the hideout, and the portal grabbed Izuku and Bakugo, as well as the villains. And when the portal was gone, Izuku and Bakugo find themselves in the remains of a destroyed city block, and around them was the League of Villains. But now there was one more person, and there was also pro-heroes, but they were on the ground and they seemed to be knocked out. But before Izuku could check anything else, the League came at the two and they began to attack. And after a couple of minutes, All Might came from the sky and he collided with the villain in the suit. And when they collided, they seemed to be at equal strength. Then after a couple of seconds of the two just locking eyes, they began to fight. And after a couple of minutes, Izuku was able to tell that he and Bakugo needed to leave quickly, since he could tell that All Might was holding back, and he suspected that it was because he didn't want to hurt them in the crossfire. And while Izuku was thinking this, he began to look around, and eventually he saw a piece of red hair peeking out from a destroyed wall, and he instantly knew it was Kirishima. And after a couple of seconds, Izuku told Bakugo to get ready, and when he nodded, Izuku moved the ground around the group, making dirt fly around, creating a dirt cloud. Then while they were hidden, Izuku made earth walls, leading to the building Izuku found Kirishima. Then Izuku grabbed Bakugo and he began to run as fast as he could, and when they got to the building, Izuku put down the walls, and by the time the cloud was gone, Izuku and Bakugo were both behind the wall. Then the two began to talk to the group that were hiding behind the wall, which was Kirishima, Momo, and Todoroki, and Ida did not come since he didn't know about the plan. And since the villains didn't know exactly where they were, the group just ran away until they eventually got to the plaza. And there they were able to see the fight between All Might and All For One, with the results being the exact same. And a couple of days later, Aizawa and All Might told all the parents of Class 1A that the students will be moving to the dorm. And since Izuku doesn't get as injured as he would have originally, Inko was okay with Izuku moving in. And a couple of days later, they move in, with the same with Sue still happening. So now we skip a week before the school year starts, and by this point, Class 1A had settled into the dorm. And that morning, Aizawa tells 1A to meet him and Jim Gamma wearing their hero costume. And when they get there, they were told that they will come up with ultimate moves for the provisional license exams, with the help of him, Cementos, and Ectoplasm. And when Aizawa was done talking, he sent everyone to different parts of the gym with an Ectoplasm clone. And on the first day of training, Izuku spent that whole day by practicing his water bending. And by the end of the 2 days, he was able to manipulate water just enough so he could change the phase of the water in just a couple of seconds. And he could shoot out water with the force of a punch. And on the other days, Izuku spent the time learning different moves for his other bendings. So now he can make an air cocoon by spinning around. He knows how to cover himself with earth, making an earth armor, and he can make powered up fire attacks, increasing the power. And by the time of the exam, Izuku changed his hero costume, so the color scheme is the same, but now it's a jumpsuit with his whole body covered, except for his hands and fingers. And he has a water container on his belt, which allows him to bend water just about anywhere. He also got a new piece of equipment which was inspired from one of his past lives, so he now has a staff that allows him to bend air better, and allows him to fly when he clicks the button, that makes the staff shoot out wings, which is connected to a suit with a container on his back. So now we skip to the day of the exam, and when Class 1A gets to where the exams are taking place, they meet the same people as they do in the canon, so they know about Inasa and Miss Joke. And after a bit of time, they change into their hero costume, and they walk into the exam room with everyone else. And when the main examiner believed that everyone was there, the exams began, by him explaining the rules of the first phase, which only the first 100 examinees to finish will pass. And when he's done explaining, he passes out 3 targets targets and balls to every student, and when they all place them on themselves, the walls of the room start to unfold, and they find themselves in a large arena. Then they were given a couple of minutes to split up, and most of Class 1A stuck together, but Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari leave, and going by himself, Todoroki leaves as well. And after a couple of minutes, the exams began, and when it started, all the other schools began to attack UA, and Izuku was able to protect him and his classmates by manipulating the air around the balls being flung at them, redirecting them at the enemy. But after some time, Yo was able to tell that they wouldn't be able to get them out if they were together, so he put his hands to the ground and began to vibrate the ground using his ultimate move. And saying this, Izuku tells his classmates to protect him, and he began to bend the ground so that it wouldn't be as strong. And after some time, Yo had to stop since the backlash from his ultimate move got to him. And with Class 1A still together, they were stuck in a giant battle, and eventually everyone got tired. And when they got tired, Yo tried to do the same thing again. But since Izuku was tired this time, he wasn't able to stop it, and all of Class 1A got split up, including Izuku. And in the quake, he lost his balls. And when Izuku was able to open his eyes again, he saw that no one was around, so he picked himself back up and he began to look around, since he knew that he would be doomed if he was by himself and the other schools find him. And after a couple of minutes of walking, he was able to detect footsteps behind him. And when he sensed that they were about to attack, Izuku made an earth wall to block the attack. And when Izuku jumped over the wall to see who attacked him, he saw no one. Then he jumped down from the wall, and after a couple of seconds, he sensed more footsteps, so he instantly turned around and he shot out a gust of wind, which hits Kimi head on, which also knocks her to the ground. And in the process, she dropped the ball that she was holding. And seeing this, Izuku then went to grab the ball, and when he looks back at her when he grabbed the ball, she was gone. And this cycle happens again and again, with Kimi hiding her presence, and whenever she tried to attack, Izuku would counter it, making it so neither were actually doing any damage. But after a couple of minutes, a school notices random sudden gusts of wind and flames, so they go to see where they came from. And when they find the source, they find Izuku, and when Izuku sees that he's surrounded, he goes to look where he last saw Kimi, but again, she was gone. And after a couple of seconds, the school began to barrage Izuku with attacks. And seeing this, Izuku used most of his energy to create a tornado as big as he could make, which sucked up all the balls the school threw. And when Izuku believed that he gathered them all, he redirected them at the enemy, which hit many people, but they didn't actually get anyone out. And before Izuku could do anything else, he noticed Ochako, who shouted for him to come to her. But when she said that, she slipped on a rock she was standing on. And seeing this, Izuku got out his staff, and he made it shoot out its wings. He then flew at her, and he went right under her, making her land on the glider. Then using his airbending, he flew as fast as he could, and eventually the two were able to lose the enemy school. And while Izuku was scouting the area behind a rock to see if there was anyone after them, he realized that if it was Ochako, then she would have been able to float away, since that's what she's been practicing on. And while he was thinking this, he noticed small movements from Ochako, with her coming closer to him. And before she actually made contact, Izuku hit her hand away, and when he looked to see what was in her hand, it was a ball. He then tells her that if she really was Ochako, she would have been able to escape. And seeing that she was revealed, her face started to melt, revealing her true form, which was Kimi. But before anything else could happen, the real Ochako and Sarah appeared, and when Kimi sees them, she retreats. And after confirming that the two are the real thing, the three come up with a plan to get the targets that they need. So Izuku was bait, and he began to fly around, drawing attention to himself, which made other people start to follow after him. And when there was enough people, Izuku landed, which got him surrounded. Ochako then appeared, and she threw giant rocks that had Sarah's tape attached. And when they were over the enemy, she gave them weight again. And before the tape could hit Izuku, he raised the ground around him, making 4 walls, which made the tape hit everyone except Izuku. Izuku then made a tunnel to where there wasn't tape. And when Izuku got out, he grabbed a ball, and the three began to get the targets that they need. And when they were done, they had enough to pass. And when they got them, the announcer told them to get to the waiting room. And when the three get to the waiting room, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari got there at the same time. So now we skip to when the first phase of the exam ends. And when it does, they are given a couple of minutes of rest, and when the break was over, the main examiner got onto a podium, and he began to congratulate them for making it so far. He then shows them on a big screen the arena they were just in blow up. And when the explosions were over, the examiner told them that a villain just attacked the city, then fled. But there were many civilians that got caught in the crossfire, and he told them that it was their job to rescue them. And when he was done talking, the room unfolded again. And when it was completely unfolded, the exam began. And when it started, Class 1A started off in one big group, besides Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari. And eventually, the group comes across a little kid with blood coming from their head. And Izuku got some points taken off, since when he was analyzing the situation, he blurred out that this doesn't look good. And after Izuku got yelled at by the kid, he smiled, and he said that it will all be okay. And when the kid hears this, he allows Izuku to take him to the first aid station. So then Izuku picked up the kid, and he ran as fast as he could towards the station, using his airbending to run faster. And after Izuku was able to secure the kid, he was about to run back to the city to find more victims. But before he could move, he and everyone else in the arena heard the main examiner on the speakers telling them that the villain that attacked the city has come back for round 2. And right after he was done talking, someone burst through the walls of the arena. And when the dust settled, Izuku and everyone else at the first aid station sees Gang Orca and dozens of of his henchmen. And seeing this, Izuku began to run towards the group, but before he got to them, he gets stopped by Yo, who told him to stop. Then he put his hands to the ground and used his quirk to create tremors under the group. But as a counterattack, Gang Orca used his quirk and hit Yo point blank with an ultrasonic wave attack, paralyzing him. And seeing this happen, Izuku began to run at the group again, and this time, Inasa and Todoroki ran with him to fight the group of villains. And while they were fighting, the same things happened between Inasa and Todoroki while Izuku tried to fight Gang Orca. And luckily, since Izuku was able to bend the air and fire around himself that the two were firing, he was actually able to attack Orca. But since Orca had a water bottle, he didn't get dehydrated, and eventually a straight flame goes towards Yo. And seeing this, Izuku began to run as fast as he could, and he picked him up, and with that, neither of them got burned. And while he was running, Izuku shouted at the two, saying, "What the hell is wrong with you two?" And hearing this, the two decided to work together. So after 30 seconds, the two were able to surround Gang Orca in a spiral of flames. But even though it was weakening him, it wasn't enough to defeat him, since Gang Orca had a water bottle. But since he was using the bottle the whole time while fighting Izuku, he was weaker than he would have been. And while Orca was trapped in the spiral of flames, Izuku ran into the spiral, and he began to fight Orca using his earthbending staff. And eventually, Izuku moved all the water he had stored up, and he moved it towards his right hand, and he went for a punch in the gut. But right before he made contact, Izuku shot out the water, which increased the power of the punch. And the moment Izuku landed the hit, on the speakers, the main examiner announced that the last civilian has been saved, so the exams are now over. And that's when we're going to leave the What If. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z.